This episode of the Managing Madrid Podcast is brought to you by Intercontinental San Francisco Hotel, where you can bring your furry family members. Treats, toys, bowls, and beds are all included in your rate. They are also waiving their pet deposit, a $100 value if you book now. Go over and book your stay at Intercontinental San Francisco Hotel. They are proud sponsors of our show, and they are hosting our podcast happening in the Bay Area coming up in July, and we are doing Las Vegas and San Francisco back-to-back. Las Vegas on the 24th. I had to look that up. Las Vegas on the 24th and then San Francisco on the 25th. So back-to-back in two different cities. We are going to be in Vegas for Clásico and then San Francisco for the game against Club America. We've designed it a certain way so that if you're in town for those two games, you'll also be in town for our podcast. So make sure to come out to our podcast in Vegas and San Francisco. The links are in the show notes. This is your last chance. We are not coming back. I promise you that. We were so tired from the World Tour last season, even though every single second of sleep lost was well worth it to meet you guys. It was a ton of fun, but we're focusing all of our energy this season to just going to the Bernabeu and doing more away games than we did in the previous years. So unless Real Madrid do preseason again, we might not come back to the United States. So this is your last chance to probably come see us if you're on the West Coast. Drive in, even if you're not going to the games. We really look forward to meeting you. And again, link is in the show notes for next weekend's shows. So coming up is a podcast about Barca's transfers. I know it's kind of an unorthodox subject on the Managing Madrid Podcast, but a lot of people are panicking. And so we thought we'd bring in someone to speak about it objectively, what it means for Real Madrid and where we are in our own squad building process. And as a reminder, if you're not a patron, you already miss a killer show. You missed two killer shows actually over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid. You get at least 2 bonus shows a week and sometimes 3. Certainly when the season starts, all those Champions League big post-game shows are going to be exclusively on Patreon. We're also doing a live Zoom podcast exclusively for patrons before the month ends. We'll keep you updated on that as well. So enjoy today's podcast, and we're going to get started with our great friends, Ray Hudson and Derek Ray. Let's go.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hello and welcome to a Sunday edition of the Managing Madrid Podcast. We are here to discuss all the things Real Madrid fans are panicking about or not panicking about. A lot of them are actually pretty relaxed about the situation, but a lot of people are not. And given that it's a slow Sunday, I wanted to talk about Barcelona signings because that's what all Real Madrid fans are talking about. So don't come at us saying, well, why are we obsessed with the rival? Why are we doing a podcast about them? Well, it's directly related, and let's be honest, you guys are all talking about it too. So we might as well also sit in on the conversation with you guys in this virtual living room. And I called Euan specifically to join me on this podcast because little do people know, because he's been on the podcast so many times, that Euan is not a Real Madrid fan. And I thought it would be good to have an objective fan here talking about his thoughts, because I admittedly will have my own biases as a Real Madrid fan, and if you ask the Culé, they'll have their own biases about it. So I thought a neutral observer that just loves Spanish football, who just could sit here and give us an objective perspective of what's happening in La Liga right now. So first of all, welcome to the show. How are you? Doing well?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Still hot in Madrid, but all good.
I mean, I feel like in Madrid, this time it's like 9:30, right? A little bit past?
Yeah, 9:30, yeah.
9:30 at night. That's like the worst for me, is like that time when it's like you're home and like you're going to try to fall asleep in the heat. And that's the one, that's for me is when it always hit me at nighttime. Not even when the sun goes down, like that's when it hits me.
Yeah, that's why no one even tries to go to sleep till like 2 a.m. You just can't beforehand.
Well, you're nocturnal anyway. You won't sleep till sunrise. All right, so this has been a huge weekend of Spanish football news because, as you and I were speaking the last podcast we did together last week, that if you're a Real Madrid journalist covering the team, there's not much to talk about. If you're a Barcelona journalist covering that team, it's just nonstop. It's crazy. There's just so much to cover right now. And I don't know. There's part of me that still felt like, even though the rumors were getting hotter and hotter, I still wasn't sure if they would actually be able to sign Lewandowski. And lo and behold, they did. Were you surprised when it officially just got confirmed? Did you see it coming?
I mean, this is maybe a more general point, but nowadays with transfer news, we see it all coming. There's so many reporters, so much of it is discussed that it's really rare now that you just get a signing completely out of the blue that nobody was talking about. So when it actually gets announced, you're not surprised. I was on Marca working with them when it was officially announced, and we already were preparing everything because it goes little by little by little. So at that point on Saturday night, we already knew it was going to happen because these things are so slow motion. But if you'd asked me this time last week, or when we did a podcast the other day at the start of last week, would Barcelona have signed Lewandowski by the next time we would speak? I would probably have said no. So yeah, it did go quite quickly. But at the same time, this is one that's been talked about all summer. Same with Rafinha. And then once Barcelona approved their sort of economic levers, as they're called, we knew that they had the possibility to sign some players, and these were the two players that they'd been linked with the most, and these were the two that they wanted. So it made sense that once they had the money, they could go and sign these guys.
So I'll give you I'll fill you in on what the perspectives of Real Madrid fans are in reaction to all this, and I'll give you the two different perspectives of different side, depending on what side of the fence you're on. And also give my perspective. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of Real Madrid fans are looking at their signings and saying, oh, look at they're strengthening their team. They have all these great attacking players now. While we're just kind of staying pat. We signed Tchouaméni and Rudiger, maybe in positions that we weren't desperate in, but they're two really good players, obviously. I'm personally happy with, but we didn't fill the need of that guy we missed out on after we missed out on Mbappe, while they're strengthening their team like crazy. And there's the other set of the fans who think, well, we didn't really need many players. We just won the double and stuff. And it's hard to strengthen the team. This is my perspective. And I mentioned this to Lucas on Thursday. But for those who haven't heard it yet, naturally, a team that just won the double will have less to improve than a team that just got knocked out of the Champions League in the group stages, bounced out of the Europa League, had a ton of turmoil. Naturally, they're just going to be more desperate, and they'll have more to improve. That's just the reality. And to me, it kind of reminded me, although it's obviously not exactly the same thing, but in 2009, we went on a massive spending spree. And I don't really remember what they did in 2009, to be honest, but I can tell you for sure it wasn't what we did. And naturally, because the two teams needed two different things. And so I just think it's for this summer, this is what was needed for them, and we can't react to what they're doing. We have to focus on our path. I won't say that we can't improve our squad. We absolutely can, and we should. I think there are one or two more signings that we could do, but that's another different discussion. But that's just my reaction to what they're doing. And I think my personal feeling is, and my hunch is, that if this wasn't happening in Barcelona right now, there wouldn't be a huge push from fans in the Spanish capital to sign more players. So I'm wondering where you stand on all this. As an objective fan.
No, I think that's it, right. I would say that, yeah, I think the reactions I see from Real Madrid fans are there's two. Number one is a bit of anger. How can Barcelona afford these players? How are they allowed to do it when they're 1.3 billion in debt? Why is La Liga allowing them to sign them? Well, La Liga sets out the rules, and Barcelona actually are following the rules. They've sold a lot of future assets, future television rights. They've sold almost half of the media company that they set up a few years ago that did really well, made a few documentaries. So, everything is above board. It's not a conspiracy, but I do see a lot of people being angry that a club that is 1.3 billion euros in debt can sign these players. Then I see some Real Madrid fans that have a little bit of fear, and I don't really understand that, because it goes exactly to your point. It's Real Madrid are coming from a position of strength. Barcelona had so much work to do. Real Madrid had such a head start. And it's interesting you bring up 2009. That's a really good example, because at that time it was Guardiola had been there 1 year. Barca had just won the treble. Real Madrid had a new president, well, a new old president, because Florentino Perez came back. It's a big summer of spending because he wants to make a statement. We're seeing all of that now on reverse, basically. With Joan Laporta, this is his second big transfer window, but his first one where he's had some money to work with. And Real Madrid, the rival, have just won a double. So it makes sense. Go back to 2009-10, who won the league the next year. It was a team that was coming from a position of strength. It took a while for, Cristiano Ronaldo, Benzema, Xavi Alonso, I think, Kaká, all the guys they signed that summer. Took a couple of years. Took Mourinho, took a new coach even, for all those players to really work and start winning things. So just because you spend a lot of money on players, build a new squad, maybe that's a reason to be a little bit fearful or angry, but I would always rather be in the position of strength, not needing to do this. And also, never mind all the players, because it's not Football Manager, it's real life as well. You need to then make all these pieces fit. Real Madrid know all their pieces fit. Rudiger comes in, perfectly sensible signing, he'll fit in right away. Tchouaméni seems like a really intelligent, hard-working guy, really professional. He, I think, will just adapt, quite similar to the way Camavinga came in last summer. So Real Madrid have the setup for it to work. Barcelona need to make all these pieces gel. They need to work out what to do with, for example, Aubameyang, who was amazing the second half of last season. Now you've got Lewandowski. Are you playing them together? Is Aubameyang on the bench? Is he going to be angry? You need to make it all work. And the coach can't even go on the preseason tour to the USA because he visited your country, your friends in Iran too many times that he wasn't allowed in with his visa. He has to spend a few days trying to get that sorted before he can even join up on Barcelona's preseason tour. So if I'm a neutral fan right now, which I am, I'd so much rather be in Real Madrid's position where you've got fewer signings, but a system, a squad, a process, a coach already in place, and it works. Barcelona have to try and fit all these parts together now. That's the hard bit.
So what's interesting also about the 2009 parallel is that, as you said, Barca won the next year. But those signings were seeds planted for the future. And
True.
Obviously you can't, it's hard to have patience when you're Real Madrid and you just broke a bunch of world records. But they did eventually come good, and they did win a lot of trophies together. When you look at Barcelona's summer, and again, with the risk of being, because I know a lot of Barcelona fans actually listen to this podcast, and with the risk of being labeled as the guy who's just talking like this because he's a Real Madrid fan, and if the roles were reversed, my stance would be opposite. I promise you that won't be true. But when I look at Barcelona's signings, they're not necessarily signings that are like seeds planted for trophies a decade from now. I actually really believe Lewandowski will be good for a few years still. He's got the prototype of the Modric, Cristiano Ronaldo, Zlatan, Benzema kind of figure who takes care of himself, mentally sharp. I truly believe that. He'll be really good for them. Rafinha, I think, is a good player, but he's not that much of a difference maker. But he's just a squad player that they spent a ton of money on. And I'm probably, who am I forgetting? Who else did they sign? Some of their rumored signings haven't made official yet.
And Christensen.
Yeah, these guys are not going to
Pablo Torre, who's very much the opposite, where it's, he's not even a seed yet. He's, he's so young that it's many years down the line. So
yeah, who knows with him? He could be a Ricky Puig or he could be a Pedri. But with, Christensen, I don't think any Real Madrid fan is scared of because we saw what Vinicius did to him. I think Kessié is a player that I watch regularly with Milan covering Brahim Diaz. He's a good player.
Of course.
I don't really know. He's definitely not an upgrade over Frankie if they do end up parting ways with him. And we'll see what happens with the Azpilicuetas and stuff. These are all good squad players to have. These are not seeds planted for trophies decades from now. It's Lewandowski really and Rafinha who are the two big ones for them. So even when I look at Real Madrid's squad, our identity this season, a lot of it was culture and unity and leadership and character. And Tchouaméni and Rudiger fit that sporting model. the worry is mostly about the attack. It's like it's one thing to be worried about the right wing, and then the other worry is that what happens if there's an injury to Vinicius or Benzema, and to that I would say it's not an illegitimate concern to have. But I would also say, like, what happens if you get an injury to any star in any team? It destroys them. What happens if Lionel Messi got injured at Barca? What happens if Cristiano Ronaldo got injured at Real Madrid? What happens if any superstar in any team is going to hurt them, and there's not going to be really any backup for them? But the other debate is like, well, you should sign someone because the games that Benzema didn't play, you really look like a different team. You lost that leadership in attack. There was even defensive dominoes of that because Benzema actually organized and defended a lot too. And to that, again, it's like, who is going to be that guy who's going to play 5 games a year and accepting of that role? I agree that Benzema should play less next year. It's a World Cup year. It's going to be really challenging. He's 1 year older. But it's going to be really hard to fill that role. Ironically, I was actually looking at Memphis perhaps going to Spurs for 17 million. I was like, oh, that's interesting. He could be a nice Benzema backup, actually. But the thing is, like, the pseudo left wing false 9 type player is abundant at Real Madrid with Hazard, Rodrigo, Vinicius. Asensio can play false 9 if he stays. So it's, again, like, the club is not looking at it through the fans' lens, and it's just completely different for them.
No, definitely. And with Benzema, it's so specific that if you're looking for a number 9 to back up Benzema, it's the kind of player that isn't going to be able to fit in on the right or left wing as well and get some minutes alongside Benzema. It's such a specialised role that it's almost like being a backup goalkeeper if you're the backup to Benzema. You know that I'm playing when Benzema is not playing, and there's never a moment where I'm going to play alongside Benzema. With Messi and Ronaldo, it was a little bit different because they played a little bit wider, especially at their peak when they were at Barcelona and Real Madrid. And you could be a backup to Messi, a backup to Ronaldo, knowing you're almost never going to play. But it was more of a fluid position that you could maybe sometimes play with them as a centre forward, as a left winger when, for example, Di Maria or Bale, or in Barcelona's case, Neymar or Pedro was out injured. So the way Benzema plays, it's so specialised that you play when he's not playing. You don't play with him. So you need someone who's going to be accepting of that role. Jovic, I think, was there. He did it for a couple of years. He's moved on. You need to address it like that. And I think you need to look maybe towards veteran players, but then it has its own risks because if Benzema's a risk to get injured because he's older, well, so too is someone like, just for talking sake, Cavani. He's as likely to be injured as Benzema, and then you maybe have both of them injured at the same time. So that is a problem to have, but luckily, at least the last few years, haven't been many injuries at all. Luckily, during the Messi and Ronaldo era, neither of them really had many injuries either. I guess it's one of those ones that you just hope it doesn't happen, because if it does, well, you're kind of screwed anyway, even if you do have a half-decent replacement. So I like the idea of, if you go back in Real Madrid's history, having the players like the Adebayors, the Chicharitos. I don't know if we've had anyone post that era that I can think of, but I'm referring to the seasoned veteran who won't care about minutes. I like that. I like that better than, like, Dzeko was one I've been vocal about, like, that would be a cool sign. He's still really good. But the thing is, I'm just assuming that he'd be okay with that role. I don't even know if he would. And there has been no real links with him. But that makes sense more to me than like a Latasa or like a young Castilla player, because a young Castilla player can't play once or twice and do something. He might. But a seasoned veteran who doesn't really care about playing time as much is going to have the experience to come in that position and actually be able to score a goal. So these are names that I actually would like Real Madrid to go in. Like these veteran seasoned strikers who might want to just be a part of a championship at this stage of their career. They won't care about playing X amount of minutes. I would like Real Madrid to actually pursue a player like that. Whether they will is another question. I mean,
it doesn't seem like it.
No, I mean we said this on the last podcast. It was just, Barcelona is crazy. There's names, there's rumors, there's actual signings now. Real Madrid, there's nothing. And actually, I think the day after we spoke, we had the first press conference of pre-season, and the very first question someone asked Ancelotti about transfers. Are there going to be more transfers? and the press officer said, "Hang on, we're not here to talk about that. That's not allowed." But Ancelotti answered anyway. He's like, "I don't mind answering. I'll tell you right now. No, there's not going to be any more signings. We're happy as it is." I still think if like a certain player might leave, then they would try to fill that void in the squad. But I think he's right. They're not looking to sign anybody else, and I don't think Real Madrid is I would say stupid enough to go and sign someone now just because Barcelona has signed Rafinha and Lewandowski. I think they expected Barcelona to make some signings just because Barcelona's getting all the attention, all the birthday gifts at this point. You don't need to deviate from your strategy, which was make a couple of signings, try to get Mbappe, didn't work. Don't go crazy trying to chase someone else just to keep the fans happy, just to sign a Galactico because you didn't get Mbappe, just to sign a Galactico because Barcelona got Lewandowski. The days of Real Madrid doing that kind of transfer policy are long gone. Not that long gone. There's not that much in the recent past, but they don't do that anymore, and it's worked quite well, I think.
So what's interesting also about depth is that, I've long been vocal that too much depth is actually a bad thing. It can hurt the continuity and rhythm of certain players. It can be problematic in the locker room. There's a sweet spot with depth that you have to hit, which I think Real Madrid have hit in certain seasons and haven't in other seasons. If you look at last season's depth chart, Bale, Hazard, Isco were all on the depth chart. Were they really as part of our depth? We never even went that deep. In fact, there was a part of me that would argue that had Bale been healthy, that would have been bad for the team in the sense that Rodrigo may not have played certain key minutes. That's just, I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but we never actually went that deep in the depth chart anyway. And so, it's tough. Again, it's not like insurance all across the board. I'm not saying it is. There is a freak injury away from disaster, and I would like to have probably someone else come in that could do a pseudo right-wing central forward role. That would be a nice sweet spot to hit as well. But I don't know how deep you go anyway, and I also this could be a really naive assumption, but if Hazard can stay relatively healthy, people are going to hate me for saying this. It's kind of a new signing. It's so lame. But like if he can just stay healthy, he solves some of our depth problems at the left wing and false nine, which Ancelotti talked about in the press conference. But so that's just another thing. But like basically right now, if we look at we have 6 players for 3 positions: Vinicius, Rodrigo, Benzema, Asensio, Hazard, and I'm counting Fede as the 6th.
Or one of Mariano and Borja Mayoral too. I think one of them will stay.
You think one of them will stay?
One of Mariano and Borja Mayoral I think will stay, and the other one will go on loan or sold, or one of these new 50% deals.
Yeah.
That...
Again, and back to that point, Mariano was not depth if he stays. Mariano was not depth. He's just like, you're not going to go that deep anyway. Mayoral, if I had to choose between one of those two, I would choose Mayoral. I think Mayoral has done more in La Liga, has had a good season at Getafe in terms of efficiency. He was pretty good under Fonseca at Roma. I think he's a better player, and he has that more Benzema type profile. Anything else to say about Barca signings and Real Madrid squad building?
Just one thing, just going back to speaking and viewing it as a neutral, is just how cool is it that next season we're going to have Lewandowski versus Benzema.
Yeah,
both of them will be 34. Benzema's already 34. Lewandowski will turn 34 in August. Both of them will be 34 going into the season. But in my view, they're the 2 best centre forwards in the world still at this moment in time, and I think they still will be for the next year or two. Maybe there's a debate over certain players. Are they centre forwards or not? Mbappe, is he better? Sure. But I think out and out number 9, which they both are, I think they're the 2 best in the world. And we get to see them going head to head in La Liga, which is the closest we've had to Messi versus Ronaldo since Messi versus Ronaldo. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be really interesting. 2 older guys, still going at it, still going to get 20 plus goals, the 2 of them. And I think it's going to be a good, much closer, obviously, league campaign than last year. So as a neutral, I'm all for it. Then you've got Atletico with Morata, so that's quite a drop off there. But Barcelona and Madrid seem set at number 9.
It's good for the league. It's 100% good for the league. Like, we haven't had good Clásicos for a long time. You actually, like, since Xavi has come back.
The last one was interesting, at least. Maybe
yeah,
Real
not for
fans
us,
pretend. Yeah, exactly. But it was a good one. Like,
but this season, and I would argue since the return of Xavi, some heat has returned. Like, it was too friendly for too long after Mourinho left, I found. Especially after Lucho left, and it kind of just got watered down, and then Ronaldo left, and then Ramos left, and it just got watered down over time. But I think since Xavi's return, it's some tension has.
I don't know. There's been some. You remember the one in Valdebebas in the rain, either 3-2 or 3-1, or I don't know. There's been. The Clásico still the Clásico.
All right. No, well, compared to like Mourinho versus Pep era.
No, of course, but that was a decade ago now.
Yeah, I know. I miss those days though.
Even Luis Enrique era, Barca. I would say some of the Clásicos of the last 2 years have still been as good as that. No, I think the Clásico's still been good fun. There was a 0-0 draw for the first time in like 2 decades, and everyone freaked out.
Yeah, that was the one at the Camp Nou, right?
Yeah,
and everyone was like, "Clásicos not what it used to be." And it was a boring Clásico, that one. But
no, of course.
Yeah,
but you compare it to anything else. How many boring Man City, Liverpool, Man United, there's when you play so often, there's been a lot more dud. Other rivalries in world football than the Clásico. So, there was 1-0 and everyone freaked out. And actually, it wasn't the worst 0-0. It was more interesting than maybe some other ones that we'd seen in the past. But last year, the one at the Camp Nou, Alaba's goal, Barca trying to get back into it, was interesting. The Supercopa Clásico, like you say, with Xavi back, it was a good fun going to extra time. And then the one at the Bernabeu, okay, for sure, for Real Madrid fans, you want to forget it. But from just looking on as a neutral point of view, it was fascinating to see what happened there with a league leader that was so far ahead just being destroyed. So Clásico always produces storylines, and now we've got 2 complete poster boys to lead it, along with their sidekicks like Vinicius, Ansu Fati, Pedri, Valverde, Camavinga. I think it's a exciting time when you look at El Clásico and La Liga, I think, compared to the doomsday scenario that was painted even just a few weeks ago by some.
Well, now that you've just ripped up my Clásico sucks now theory, I do think it is also interesting the Lewandowski Benzema thing being the 2 best strikers in the world, both in the same league now. It's good that La Liga has that pull, because a lot of people are worried about, the Premier League basically just sucking in all the stars. And so I really do think La Liga needs more stars like this. So the other thing I'll say before we wrap this part of the discussion up, anytime one of Real Madrid or Barcelona has been far above the other, it's been good for the one trailing behind.
Yeah.
There's a desperation, a push, injection of talent, better strategic planning from one of them, and then there's a bit of a catch-up, then they're on level terms, and then another one pulls away, and it's just kind of, this has been how it's pretty much been since I've been watching football. So it's good for the league, and I think it's good for the Clásico, and it's it'll be fascinating. I'm not too worried about Real Madrid. Part of the reason I wanted to have this discussion on the podcast was, 1, because it is a little bit slow, or 2, because I've seen a lot of panic in the fan base, and in my opinion, there's no need to panic, because I think this team is really good.
And like your point, talking about not just this season, but the longer term seeds that Real Madrid have are far better than what Barcelona have, I think, for the longer term. But yeah, for the 2022-23 season, I think it'll be close and good. But yeah, like you said earlier, a lot of the Barcelona signings are maybe only their stopgaps for 1 or 2 years. But yeah.
Well, it's one thing that I'll plant another seed for the world in 3 years.
Yeah.
Benzema and Lewandowski, same age, probably going to age the same way.
Yeah.
They'll probably leave their respective clubs at the same time, I would assume, or slow down at the same time. And then there's going to be a push to see who can get Haaland in like 3 years, is I think what's going to happen. So buckle up for that scenario. I wanted to speak about Kubo. Your thoughts on this? This is another deal where it's the 50% rights. You hold on to the 50% of the rights of the player. Can you explain maybe some of the thought process behind doing deals like this all summer? Because this is now after Mario Gila, Victor Chust, Luka Jovic. I think this is the fourth one now.
Yeah, by my count, it's the fourth one.
Yeah.
A complete change in strategy instead of just loaning players out. But I think this is also because I think Real Madrid are putting these players at good clubs where I think the players want to be, where I think they have a lot of good opportunities, but clubs that are at a good level and have a bit of pull power to be able to demand something a little bit more permanent than a loan. I think Real Madrid's problem you'll know from the loan tracker, but just for too many years, Real Madrid have given out players to terrible loans. So many bad loans, badly fought loans, just to clubs that are friends, Valladolid, Leganés, clubs that were convenient, that maybe offered to pay a bit more of the wages, but clubs that didn't really make sense. Clubs that were maybe a little bit below the player they're loaning out's level. Now they're putting players into clubs that I think are at their level or might be a bit of a challenge. But these clubs are more like Europa League clubs, or depending on the player, of course. But with Kubo, you've got him going to Real Sociedad, and that's a kind of club that can demand, no, we want something a little bit more permanent. So 50% of the rights, 6.5 million, it looks like, is what that fee is going to be for those 50%. And Real Madrid are going to keep a buyback for the next 5 years. So it is basically a loan, but it means that Real Sociedad can at least make some money from it if Kubo does go back. And if he stays and gets moved on again, then Real Madrid can make 50% of whatever that sale is and make some money from it, rather than just loaning a player out and then losing them on a free transfer in a few years. So I like the strategy more so just because I think it's a mechanism that allows Real Madrid to place these players at better clubs than the one I just remember is Lunin. Just every place they sent Lunin out where they had a guaranteed number one starter just made absolutely no sense. So if you can, and you look as well, Kubo's, some of the loans he's been to just made no sense. Villarreal was far too soon to go to a club that big. Then they tried to save it, put him to Getafe. That didn't make sense stylistically at all. He's been to Mallorca a couple of times. He's been with so many different coaches as well. You just feel for Kubo being put to so many bad loans, in my opinion. I think this one finally makes sense. This is the kind of club he should go to, but Real Sociedad have enough bargaining power to demand slightly better terms. So that's what they've got.
You definitely have to scratch your head at some of these loan deals. And like the one, it's one thing to send someone out on loan somewhere, but then to renew it. Like, remember Reinier Jesus? His first season at Dortmund was a disaster.
I don't know why they didn't just rip
They
that
were
up.
like, let's do it again.
I know it was a 2-year loan that they agreed at the start, but loans can get cancelled halfway through a season in winter. I don't know why they saw that one all the way through. That made no sense for him, Dortmund or Real Madrid.
The other weird one was bringing Odegaard back that summer instead of letting him just continue one more year at Real Sociedad. That was another weird decision too for all parties involved. And there's so many, you go down the list. I mean, the one that always I found funny was Xavi Sanchez going to Valladolid. He did not play at all on loan. And then when they officially signed him, they started him. After it was like official that he's no longer on loan, he's a Valladolid player, they played him like all the time. It was so bizarre. But this is maybe further proof that the club needs to be invested in the player to develop him. That's the only solution. That could be the best solution. I mean, look at Carvajal at Bayer Leverkusen. He developed there. They owned him. And then Real Madrid brought him back as a developed, polished player. And like I tweeted about this yesterday too because I was thinking about it and as I said on Twitter, we did this exercise recently. Matt and I were ranking all of Real Madrid's loanees in club history, and I actually went back all the way to the 50s. And it was a crazy exercise. And there's no like easy way to do it. You just have to go to transfer market and then look
see what comes up.
You have to go, and then you have to do it by season. So, like, basically 60 times, 70 times, 72 times. That's what I did. So, and my conclusion was, like, basically, if you go out on loan, it means you will not return as a Real Madrid player. It's so rare that these guys succeed and come back on a permanent basis. But at the same time, it's not necessarily a waste of time because often the club makes money off these guys. It's a business for them also.
But it's the exact same at Barcelona, the same at Man United, the same at Man City. Any of these clubs, if you're good enough to be in the first team, you're going to be kept around. If you're going out on loan, chances are, except in a few cases, you're not coming back to eventually make it to the first team. So it's the same at all these clubs. It's more about picking the player up, giving them opportunities, and trying to make a transfer fee down the line. Kubo's case, I think, is a little bit different because I think part of the reason he hasn't been given a season just as member 25 of the squad is the passport problem, because he's got a Japanese passport. You can only have 3 non-EU players, and at all times over Kubo's Real Madrid journey, they've been taken up. Right now it's Vinicius, whose Spanish passport is really delayed, a lot more than the club expected. And then you've got Militao and Rodrigo as well, who are still a couple of years away from being able to apply for a Spanish one. So there's no place for Kubo or for Reinier. That's why he had to go as well. He's a bit younger. He's only been out on one loan so far. But with Kubo, I think that's the reason. I think maybe last year they would have kept him in the squad just to keep a closer eye on him, just because loans can get tiring, moving, finding a new place to live, making new friends, teammates, colleagues, especially when you're that young, that age. To be fair, he's been able to go to some nice places. Mallorca's not the worst place to be sent, but I think part of the reason he hasn't been able to just stay in the Real Madrid squad is because of the passport situation. So this is why I think he's specifically one player who always generates a bit of interest, because I think one day maybe he could make it to the Real Madrid squad. It's not that he's been sent out on loan so many times because the directors are giving up on him. I think it's a bit different with his case.
It's interesting also, like, how much timing really matters, Like, your point is very interesting about, like if you're good enough, you're good enough. Like, Raul never needed to go out on loan. Iker Casillas never needed to go out on loan. However, if Casillas comes up now, like during this Courtois era, he's screwed. Same with Raul coming up now during the Benzema era. Like, that's just, so the timing really matters. And I thought, like, Kubo, this whole right wing situation Real Madrid is in right now, basically if you're anyone at Real Madrid on the right wing, the timing is in your favor. But Kubo, as you said, has the passport issues. The other thing is, I'm not, like, it's so funny because it feels like yesterday when we brought in Kubo for the first time, and I remember, like, 2000, was it 19 or 18?
Yeah, 19 would have been.
I think it was 19. And I remember...
around about this time at the start of the US tour that year.
That's right, because I remember him joining...
Or it was in Canada even, I think, that year was when they first arrived. I think so, yeah. They didn't play a game there, but they had training
in Montreal,
in Canada. Yeah. And I remember there was a report that there was about 20 journalists who went out early to cover Real Madrid's training camp there. And 10 of them were Spanish and 10 of them were Japanese. They were going crazy all about Kubo just joining Real Madrid.
Yeah. And I remember there was a lot of media around him. And I remember Modric saying that he was amazed at what he saw of him in training. He thought he was really surprised with how good Kubo was. And so we were all really excited about it. And you look at his trajectory, you went over it too. His first loan stint at Mallorca was pretty good. It took him a while to get into the team, but once he got into the team, he became an established player and was a really good offensive player for them. After that, Villarreal, as you said, probably too soon. I think the interesting thing about Villarreal, when you look at why it didn't work out, a lot of it was because Emery didn't like his tactical discipline and his defensive work.
Yeah.
In hindsight, just because he went to Getafe, which is a weird stylistic fit, as you said. They're a defensive team. They're not going to give him money touches in the final third. He was okay there, but again, he didn't really develop there. It was kind of stagnant. He stagnated. But had he stayed at Villarreal, because him and his agent both started to make a fuss that he needs to go and play more. And that's part of the reason why the Villarreal relationship broke apart. But Samu Chukwueze around that same time wasn't playing, for the same reasons Kubo wasn't, but Samu stayed and worked hard and actually worked his way into a team. I wonder if that would have been a better option for Kubo. I don't know if it would have happened, but I don't know if it would have been worse either than going to Getafe. So, and then obviously Javier Aguirre coming in to Mallorca this past season and benching him obviously didn't work for him too. I think it was still too early for him. So I like the idea of him going and learning from Alguacil, becoming a more polished there. It worked for Odegaard. So,
just for starters, because you know Imanol Alguacil is going to be there at Real Sociedad the whole season. You know the coach that Because this is the thing, when you loan these players out to relegation level teams, you don't know who's going to be the coach for the second half of the season, because probably it's not going to be the guy that's the coach just now. That was the case when you were loaning guys out at Leganés, Valladolid, these kind of teams. At least at Real Sociedad, you know that who the coach is going to be from August up till May. So that's, I think, a big positive about this one. So hopefully it works. I just feel sorry for Kubo. It's not been the easiest trajectory. Even going further back to when he was in the Barcelona academy, I'm sure a lot of people remember this, but just in case not, he was in La Masia, and it was when Barcelona had the transfer ban, and they had to release a lot of their under-18 players, especially the players who were not EU. And Kubo had to leave La Masia. He was thriving. He was one of the top players. I think he was in Ansu Fati's. No, maybe not Ansu Fati, but he was in the age group of a couple of guys that have come through at Barcelona. But he had to leave because of nothing to do with him. Just again, rules, regulations, sanctions, and that was when he went back to Japan, and he had to make a new life for himself there again. And he's just had to always be on the move, never been able to settle. So hopefully at Real Sociedad he can have a full season there, play some good football with Imanol, and enjoy a nice city like Odegaard did before.
I think he fits there too, in the sense, like, I was looking at to see how much playing time he'd get. David Silva's getting older. I don't know what's going on with Januzaj. What's going on with him? He's out of contract,
he's
right?
Gone.
He's gone.
I think he's gone, yeah.
So Kubo...
Porto too. Porto's left as well. So there's space there for sure.
Yeah, there's space there. Yeah, timing works out for Kubo. I think he'll play a lot. So we'll definitely keep our eye on him in the next year or two to see how he does, even though he's not technically a Real Madrid player. But I like the idea of the 50% also, because in case he does work out, he's arm's length away. We have a say. We can bring him back, or he may not be worth bringing back. So why not? It's a good deal. Euan, thanks for your time, my friend.
No worries.
I'll find a reason to bring you back next week. I'll find something.
Next week there's football back. Next week it really starts.
Next week at this time, actually, we'll be in Las Vegas recording a podcast in front of a bunch of people. So
exactly.
Yeah. So, but I will still find a way to call upon you somewhere. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Euan. Appreciate your time.
No worries. Always a pleasure.
All right. Before we let you guys go, we wanted to give a quick shout out to our patrons over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid, who do so much to support the show. If you like high quality journalism and you want to stay away from some of the sensationalist stuff and you want some analysis, and you like our work, go over to patreon.com/Managing Madrid. You get a ton of bonus shows, and we wanted to give a specific shout out to our $10 plus patrons, because if you pledge $10 or more, not only do you get guaranteed responses to your questions, but you also get a specific shout out on the podcast. So shout out to Brandon Alvarez, Willie Reed, Wei Pering, Wamik Jamal, Umar Mahadi, Tyler Simon, Tobias Arroyo Botcher, Tariq Goktas, Talib Salhab, Tahmid Kalam, Sushank Damala, Sujaiwani, Sumanchu Singh, Shivam Tiwari, Sherry Soriol, Sheikh Hatiri, Shamil, Shabazz Sharapov, Sergio Arispe, Santos Solorzano, Samir Z, Said Mahad, Sai Mohan Sasi Kumar, Rodrigo Balmaceda, Rishi D, Rafi Irfan Zaman, Phoenix, Peter Powell, Paulo Fierro, Patrick Odayafadi, Oscar Barrera, Nico Laxo, Nicholas Zapatero Zubiare, Nicholas Moller, Nick Ribeiro, Nelson Masariego, Muxi Thengal, Mowgli, MJ Diego, Michael Zinberg, Marin Myrtle, Martin Ridman, Logan Stahl, Leon Stavronakis, Kunal Tilakar, Crystal Glass, Kevin Rivera, Jose Cruz, John Fernandez, Jeff Thurston, Jason Fitz, Ian Marley, Graham Gerard, Gary Kohut, Frederick Rantakiro, Frederick Sundros, Faisal Hamdan, S.A. Davicito, Eloy Enriquez, Edward Sossman, Daniel Williams, Christian Toft, Christian Acosta, Charles Williams, Brendan Powers, Brandon Stevens, Ashik Bashar, Arman Gashi, Armando L, Anton Zrudenko, Anirudh Singh, Alexis Ceniceros, Al Azaz Hussein, Adrian Rios, Adar Zalikovic, Adam Dorsey, Bella Chow, Barun, Ramtin Mahrur, Fabian Moreno, and Daniel Smith. We love you guys so much. Appreciate your support. Thank you for being part of the family, and Hala Madrid.